More than 40 immigrants have died in ICE custody since 2017. Dozens of immigrants have died in US custody. And BuzzFeed News was able to learn about this through a successful lawsuit that they filed against the Department of Homeland Security. Now, at some point during the Trump administration, DHS decided they would no longer publicly release reports about the health conditions of these immigrants. And luckily, because of the reporters over at BuzzFeed News, we now know that dozens of people have died. Many of them have been denied the medical treatment and the care that they needed. I'll highlight some of the examples for you. One man from Jamaica, for instance, who had an aggressive but treatable form of cancer, was locked in solitary confinement for over a week without receiving medical care and died a month later. A Honduran transgender woman who sought asylum in the United States was severely dehydrated, showed signs of starvation, and wasn't given antiretroviral medication before she died. And that's according to the local medical examiner of complications of AIDS. And there were people who were kept in conditions that were so horrific that at least 3 of these individuals killed themselves, even though they were supposed to be under close observation since it was known that they were a risk to themselves. But of course, the private prisons that they were held in didn't really care much about providing the care that these people needed. What they cared about was ensuring that they took taxpayer money in the form of government grants to essentially dehumanize and treat these people as if they're not people at all. In multiple instances, guards who were supposed to observe detainees placed in solitary confinement for extra monitoring falsified records to hide apparent dereliction of duty. In at least 2 cases at Eloy Detention Center in Arizona and Adelanto Detention Facility in California, people died while they were not being watched, but should have been. I mean, like, you read these stories, like the very specific examples that were provided by these documents, and it just, this is what we're doing, right? This is what our government is doing. And every single time, look, I get that Obama didn't have a great record on immigration. He had a pretty bad record when it came to deportations. That's why he was referred to as deporter in chief. But he didn't have 40 immigrants die while he was in charge. You know, like, the reason why I bring that up is because every time we talk about the type of threat Donald Trump is to people in this country, to immigrants, to asylum seekers, to all sorts of people in disadvantaged situations, I always hear the whataboutism. Oh, but what about Obama? What about Obama? What about Obama? Okay, Obama didn't purposely separate children from their parents at the border as they were seeking asylum. Okay, Obama didn't, he actually stopped using private prisons on a federal level, and then Trump came in and he re-implemented the use of private prisons on a federal. I'm telling you this because the false equivalencies drive me crazy. Obama deserved the criticism for what he did, but let's not pretend like Obama's cruelty was the same as what we're seeing under Trump. Trump dehumanizes these people. Trump does not care about a single individual in this country, much less people who come here seeking asylum. And dozens of people, including children, have died as a result of that. So yeah, you can take your whataboutism and shove it.
Yeah, and by the way, every time there's one of those comparisons about the negative things that President Obama did when he was in office, the first question that I'm always asking is, so where was your criticism for him doing that at the time? Were you upset about the way he was treating immigrants? Were you upset about his deportations? So these conservatives that like to talk about, well, Obama did this first and Obama did that. Were you talking about that when Obama was doing it, or were you okay with what Obama was doing? Those few things that he was doing that coincided with what you agreed with, and how you really don't give a damn about immigrants, especially folks that are fleeing their home countries, seeking some kind of existence that isn't threatening their life every time. So there's layers to the way that ICE was approaching this. And as you already pointed out, there was these dereliction of duties. There was the ways that they weren't going to actually, they weren't checking these, they weren't doing their welfare checks. Medicines weren't provided. There's one particular guy that was put in solitary confinement. All those things that you mentioned. After doing those things, and then, as you point out, BuzzFeed had to make sure that they forced their way into getting sued, their way into getting the information. The information we discovered was then they went with, we just talked about the Breonna Taylor case, a cover up over every one of these instances. And then once you find out the real things that happened, which was the transgender woman who died, and they didn't provide her with any kind of medical treatment. They said it was a heart attack, and they looked further into it and found that they did know about what was going on. They tried to cover it up. Then another guard who didn't do his duties as far as following and checking in and doing his welfare checks. He said, no, I mean, he falsified his records for when he went in, but the video evidence didn't provide that. If those things weren't discovered, if the lies weren't shown and illustrated just how blatant they were, they would have just continued to get away with it. So how many instances of this have happened where they did just get away with it, where they did lie about it and say, no, man, I did my job, it's okay. And then we just believed them and moved on. How many times did that happen? For these few times we found out that it didn't.
Plenty. Yeah, it's not, I'm sure plenty.
And we just continue on down the same road. These places aren't shut down. The whole thing isn't changed. We're not worried about the 545 kids that were still separated from their parents. We're not worried about any of that. It's just cover it up because that's just the way we do things here. And they go through, there's so many stories about this. We just talked about a few weeks ago where women, the uteruses are getting scoped and removed, and medical treatments done by this doctor
yeah.
that decided to do this because that's just the way they feel it should happen.
Yeah, they're essentially sterilizing women without their consent, and they won't ever be able to have children again as a result of that, or ever if they don't already have children. It's the most hideous, disgusting, cruel, I mean, shameful. Yep. In another instance, surveillance footage showed a detainee falling out of his wheelchair and struggling to move, but nurses told a guard who expressed concern that the detainee was faking or exaggerating his symptoms. Later that day, the detainee died.
Yeah, because you know why? Because if someone's in a state of emergency and you don't care about their life, you can say they're faking. Oh, they must be faking. Why would they be faking? To get where? If they're faking and you go check on them, does that give them a free pass to leave? Is that how it works? Or does it mean you actually don't care what will happen to them? Is it you think that's too much trouble for me?
No.
Yeah.
No, and also JR, I mean, remember, we can't forget all of the moments where Trump administration officials, particularly Jeff Sessions, before Trump decided to fire him for having a little bit of a backbone over recusing himself. Jeff Sessions said the quiet parts out loud when he said, no, we're doing this as a deterrent. This is intentional. This is intentional. Taking the children away from the border, that was a policy. It was their zero tolerance policy, intentionally implemented to deter future asylum seekers. Treating them with this type of cruelty once they're detained is intentional. And we're paying for it. I want everyone to understand that. It isn't just that ICE is and the Department of Homeland Security is carrying out these disgusting, cruel, awful policies. Our money, our taxpayer money pays for that. You think private prisons are funded through investors only? No, they're mostly funded, 95% funded through us. And so while our federal government gives us a giant middle finger during this pandemic when people need financial relief, at the same time, our money is still getting funneled into these disgusting programs that murder people, that put people in solitary confinement or leave them to die after they've fallen from a wheelchair. That's what's happening. This is America. This is American exceptionalism.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.